That's what that is, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
All right, everyone, I will call this meeting to order at 1:01 PM and begin by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish. The people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Claylequem, Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, February 9th, 2026, and thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the Chair of this meeting. I'd like to begin, as I always do, by introducing the other elected members of council here today. Starting on my left, we have Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Wake. To his right is Councillor Alison Morse. To my far right is Councillor and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. And to her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Jeannie Getty. We're also joined by several members of our professional staff team here this afternoon, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Kieran Dillon, and our Corporate Officer, Sophia Singa, as well as other members of our staff team who will be presenting reports here this afternoon. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the public comment and question and answer portion of the meeting, your presence will be included in the permanent recording, which will be available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, as well as streaming live on our YouTube channel right now, where it will be kept for posterity. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our home and we're all passionate about what happens in the community. I encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct comments for council during the public comment and question and answer portions of the meeting to myself. For those following along online or in the room or at a later date, the agenda and full council package for this afternoon's meeting, including all of the attached staff reports, is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. With that, I will look for adoption of the agenda. I'll look for a corporate officer for the introduction of any late items here this afternoon.
There's one on table item this afternoon, 12.8, and it's a letter from yourself, Mayor Leonard, regarding Islands Trust budget information.
Thank you. And with that, I will look for a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion, changes, and edits to the agenda? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments. I'll look to our corporate officer for any public comments here today.
There are no public.
No public comments, no delegations. Moving on to the consent agenda. I'll look to councils for any items they wish to pull from the consent agenda. Councillor Getty.
4.1 and 12.8.
12.1, 12.8. Any other councillors wishing to pull items from the consent agenda? Councillor Fast.
12.2.
12.2. Not seeing any further items to be pulled. I would look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Fast. Seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. 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 That carries unanimously. Dealing with the consent agenda in numerical order, we have 4.1 minutes of the regular council meeting held January 26th, 2026. Over to you, Councillor Getty.
So I don't have any problem with respect to the correctness of the accuracy of the minutes. I'd like to go on record as saying that I have some very deep concerns about the process that was followed. So with respect to the very last item on the agenda was the report from trustees with respect to the trust council, and at that the very end of that meeting, and it was a fairly long and involved meeting, there were questions that were raised by yourself, Mayor Leonard, with respect to the budget and the reported 32% increase. I have concerns with respect to not having, as one of the elected trustees, any heads up, any requests to come prepared, any indication that that was going to be a topic that would be dealt with in detail. And it was, I think, unfair to expect that we would be able to report off the top of our heads from memory without any kind of a indication that that was going to be something that you wanted to dig into. Fair enough that you wanted to dig into it. And I think that it would have been reasonable to expect that you might at least give some sort of an indication that the two trustees should come prepared to talk about it. There's a great deal of background with respect to what's been going on with the trust, and I think that that was unfortunate. And that will continue the some of the issues that I've got with respect to what's with finding.
And so disposition on this item.
Move that it be accepted as recorded.
Okay, so the minutes of the regular council meeting held January 26, 2026 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Fast. Before calling the question, I'm obviously in favor of adopting the minutes, but just your comments, Councillor Getty, I think it is fair to point out that that conversation was initiated as a result of the trustees report, where it was disclosed that there would be a 32% increase to our requisition here. So the questions were asked in response to information that we were receiving here at council. And I know that we're going to talk about the letter of 12.8. So if there's any further questions or discussions, not seeing any, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously.
Mayor Leonard?
Yes.
Just want to note that Councillor Jorgensen has arrived on scene.
Well, thank you. Welcome, Councillor Jurgensen. I'm just going to check to see that you can hear us.
He's muted.
Councillor Jurgensen, are you able to hear us?
Audio? Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. I just let you know where we are. We are on items that are pulled from the consent agenda.
Thank you.
And we just dealt with 4.1, and we're moving on to 12.2, which is a business license certificate year end 2025. Over to you, Councillor Fast.
Sure, I just had checked with the chief financial officer about what those stats mean, and it looks to me like it means that there are more businesses coming from off island to Bowen Island than there are businesses on island. So I just wanted to flag that as maybe being a bit of a watershed. Would that be correct, or can you better explain what the stats might mean?
The stats are showing that the non-resident business licenses issued in 2025 was 145, while the contractor on island was issued at 143. So you're correct, it would indicate that they are higher. I would also suspect that they are likely unreported or underreported as contractors who may come to the island once or twice a year. It's likely that they potentially don't apply for a business license yet still do business on Bowen Island. So I would support that the statistics indicate that there are more contractors coming from off island than on.
Thank you. I haven't done any trend lines or anything like that, and maybe this is a one-off, but I just wanted to flag that this was a keeping jobs, slow growth, so that there was jobs available for local residents was a discussion early on in the well, before we were a municipality and when we were a municipality, and that I just wanted to flag these stats are here to that we can look to for how many of our Bowen Islanders are we employing versus how many are we coming from off island and adding to the ferry travel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Saunders, followed by Councillor Lee.
Thank you, through the chair. I understand the point that Councillor Fast is raising. And unless I'm reading this wrong, it looks to me like the non-resident business license certainly gone up, but everything else, the local ones have gone up by a commensurate amount. And in fact, compared to 2 years ago, we're getting closer to a balance than further away from it in terms of having local business. I'm just looking at the contractor non-resident as the comparison there, but in previous years, there was more non-resident, and now that gap is closed, in fact, over the last 4 years. I don't really know that I don't think that's a bad thing, obviously, and I suspect you don't think it's a bad thing either. I'm saying it doesn't seem as dire a situation because that the non-resident is going up when everything else is going up as well. That's all. And you did not say dire. That was my word, not yours. So thank you.
Councillor Saunders, Councillor Wick.
Council Saunders made this, my point. Thank you.
So I just moved to receive the information.
Move receipt, moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any further discussion on this item? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor?
now Aye.
Muted.
Aye, and that carries unanimously. Moving on to 12.8, Mayor Andrew Leonard regarding Islands Trust budget information request dated February 6th, 2026. Over to you, Councillor Denny.
All right, so this is the second letter to the trust that has been written under municipal letterhead and signed by yourself alone. But has not come to the council prior to its being sent and has not been discussed. Certainly with me as a trustee, I'm not sure about my comment. So on January 12th, we had the late item with respect to your letter to the trust about the policy statement. Then we had that request at the end of the January 26th meeting with respect to conversation about the budget. And it may have been, the questions may have been in response to a mention that there was that increase in the percentage, but there was a whole lot more preparation behind it. And then my understanding is that there was a meeting sometime between that January 26th and the letter that's on the table today with respect to senior staff and yourself. I'm told that Councillor Morris was involved. Again, my knowledge, none of the trustees that are elected now and in position were included in any of those discussions, and this letter has gone out to the trust. So it raises a number of issues for me. If I am elected as a trustee and I put the time and the energy and the expense into that position, and I have presumably the most up-to-date information with respect to the processes that are going on with the trust, and possibly some information and feedback with respect to the work that has been done by the two existing trustees with respect to questions that are asked of the both at the finance committee meeting and at the trust council, that to ignore and bypass and have no contact whatsoever, I find to be both insulting and undercutting, and not showing any kind of either respect or confidence with respect to the work that's been done by the trustees. I don't want to speak for Sue Ellen. She's or Councillor Fast. So I'm not sure how to approach this in terms of getting you into a situation where you're willing to talk. You know, losing my temper and pounding the table, and I think that would just be turned around and I would be the one that would be losing face. I don't know that sarcasm would work. I don't know that logic and reason is working. I don't know that anything would work. So if we're of no value and any of the work that we're doing is completely disregarded and discounted, then I'm not sure if it's worth anybody's time and energy to continue with this charade. And I have been drafting my letter of resignation. Thank you very much. And it's like I have been dealing with some of the most difficult men that I have ever worked with in my entire life, and I'm putting you on that roster. So it's It's unworkable as far as I'm concerned. It's a complete waste of time and effort.
Okay.
I'm hoping maybe you'll pay attention.
Interesting. So first of all, in terms of process, you know, I would remind council per rules of order that speaking to the motivations of council members when we're discussing motions or discussing business at the table is that. So what I can speak to is process. And so in terms of the declarations of process that are being surfaced here at the council meeting with respect to the letter to the trust and the involvement of the trustees, I think those are being mischaracterized. And I would draw the attention to an email that was sent to the CFO, the CAO, as well as our two trustees, who I did loop in on February 3rd after our council meeting, that stated below is my updated list of questions for the trust based on the conversation you had yesterday. Please add any of your own and forward to trust staff ahead of our delegation later in the month. I have copied Judy and Sue Ellen here so they can be aware of what's being asked as well. And in that email, there were 40 some odd questions that were submitted with the timeline that we were going to be submitting a communication to the trust on Friday. So that process was there. I have done my best to include the trustees in on that. I did not hear any feedback or any communication in response to that email. And as a result of meetings that I had with the CFO and conversations that I've had with the CFO and information that she's been trying to receive under Trust's own policy 72.6, which details when the municipality should be getting information, the type of information that we should be getting, and the fact that we don't have that information, it's been difficult to get, and that we had a full council resolution inviting the trust to come speak on the 23rd. And it's information that council will need in order to make informed questions of the trust. The letter went out, speaking of trust policy, pieces that our own staff haven't been able to get, pieces that I haven't been able to get as a result of my own digging, and the process that we've had here. So, you know, my role based on the community charter, I would draw your attention to section 116, which is to provide on behalf of council general directions to municipal officers respecting implementation of municipal policies, programs, and other directions of the council. We gave staff a direct request to invite Islands Trust to speak here today. And that letter was on behalf of council direction to get the information that we need based on the protocol agreement that Bowen Island has with the Islands Trust. So I'll open the floor to other councillors if you feel as if I've overstepped my bounds or I haven't done my due diligence in seeking the input of our trustees as well as the Islands Trust so that we can make an informed decision and ask informed questions when we are here on the 23rd. But I've done my very best to include the trustees as well as include our staff in inviting the trust here based on the authority that I have and the process that I'm trying to hold in the face of the main issue, which is this term, there's been an 88% cumulative increase in our requisition for the Islands Trust, which I think demands questions, demands analysis, and demands response. So that's the response that I have. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I don't have any problem with the process as I've seen it and it's been described, except that I think it's difficult to, in a verbal update, answer questions and have a fulsome information for other committee members or staff. And I was happy that and so maybe in future agendas, we might want to tweak that so that we could provide more information, which I think I probably could do if I sent it to Sophie saying, could you please add this link? And I think I've done that before. The one question about process I have is that a meeting was held to which I've just learned. Councillor Morse was invited and we were not. And so I'm not sure how that came about.
Right.
But that seems odd. Otherwise, I'm really happy that the conversation is moving into more of a what are the exact questions as opposed to the Ms. and into the staff to staff realm with the, I mean, we wear two hats, speaking for Judy there, but at this table, I'm also, as well as a trustee, I'm a municipal councillor and I'm concerned about budgets. You know, I won't go into all the money we already trimmed out of that budget through the Trust Council and the Financial Planning Committee. But I just wonder about that meeting. To me, I was happy to see the process moving into a more structured thing where the staff could, you know, when the questions were written down and staff to staff could speak, and that this Islands Trust staff are coming here to speak to us, I thought was great. So I just have that one question about the process.
Yeah, and for clarity, the meeting was between myself and the CFO. Councillor Morris was in the building and dropped in for a couple of minutes. So it wasn't the formal meeting was
It
between
wasn't an
myself and the CFO.
invitation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Song.
Thank you through the chair. Just brief comment from my own perspective and only on a small part of what Councillor Getty had to say there. Is during that meeting, when 2 weeks ago, when this entire thing became a big discussion point here, and there were questions that were asked, and the trustees obviously didn't know the questions were coming, didn't know they were going to be directed at them. Fair comment there. But from my own perspective, when I was listening to the response, I thought the responses that were given by the trustees were, okay, well, what can we expect them to know? They didn't know the question was coming. So I didn't feel that cast any bad light on the way the trustees are operating, both on behalf of the trust and on behalf of council. I felt like, okay, well, they'll get the information, or somebody will get the information that we need moving forward. So for whatever else is going on in terms of process, for me, that was not an issue, that there were no answers right away. I couldn't see any way they could be, so.
Thank you, Councillor Song. Councillor Lee.
Through the chair, first of all, I really value Councillor Fast and Councillor Getty's role in terms of representing the trust here. I've learned so much about the trust through both of you. And similar to what Councillor Saunders said, at the time, I felt in the conversation, it was just really being asked. It wasn't demanding answers from you. It was really, do you have any perspective on this? And that's how I took the question. And you know, I thought you did a great job, like you always do. So.
Not seeing any further questions or comments. I'll look for a motion to receive, please. Made by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Fast. Not seeing any further discussion. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. All opposed. And that carries unanimously. Moving back to our main agenda, we are at 6.1, postponed from January 26th, when formula regarding urgent action needed temporary foreign worker program dated January 26th, 2026. Perhaps let's get the recommendation on the floor, and then we'll have Councillor Moore speak to the brief.
Move that council direct staff to submit the brief as attached to the report dated February 2nd, 2026 to the Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities, HUMA.
Okay, moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Morse. And maybe I'll turn the floor over to you, Councillor Morse, then you did the legwork on this one.
So following up on the last meeting, I went and loaded in its very precise format that has to be followed. They have a whole piece guide on how to do a brief. So if it looks a little odd, it was following their format. I would recommend it be dated today on the assumption that it would be passed. I did, run it by both Glenn Corby and Andrea Dashman, both of whom are the students. And as I mentioned, we, did make a presentation at UBCM on that. So, if anybody's got any questions about it or any more backup, I do have a copy of the brief that Children's Center has already submitted. And we got the draft letter from Glenn Cormier, so. It's a very convoluted set of legislation. I started looking into it and, my background always says, go and read the legislation. And I would hate to be an employer trying to fill out all those forms and get it. And I understand there's some issues in other communities around. Apparently have some, Sunshine Coast has issues and, yeah, it's just, disruption of these families when they come to work. And then find they came on the basis of a residency stream and then they canceled that. So it's just, so hopefully everybody's happy with it and we can move the, that submitting it.
Thank you, Councilor Morris. So I'll look for other questions, comments, debate on the motion. Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh, I didn't quite catch that. Councilor Jurgensen, was that in favor? Or against?
That was I in favor.
In favor, okay, and that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 8.1, municipal shuttle business case development.
7.1?
Sorry, 7.1. Delegation of signing authority. We have our corporate officer here to answer any questions, but can I get the recommendation on the table, please? Councilor Wade.
The council directs staff to prepare a bylaw delegating signing authority to specified officers and employees of Bowen Island Municipality, including provisions authorizing the mayor, chief administrative officer, chief financial officer, and corporate officer to execute agreements and contracts on behalf of the municipality.
Moved by Councilor Wake. Seconded by Councilor Fast. Any discussion, debate on the motion? Councilor Saunders, followed by Councilor Getty.
Thank you through the chair. Just kind of curious on what who can sign right now, or is this just an add-on to who can sign? And more specifically, are each of the roles that were given that are shown here, the CEO, CFO, they have different things they can sign for, or everybody can sign for anything?
Through the chair, the proposed bylaw, this would be formalizing an existing practice that's currently being practiced informally.
Okay.
So yeah, it would give authorization to those listed in the report, mayor, CAO, CFO, and CO to execute agreements. Currently, we're operating under the delegation of purchasing authority bylaw, which is if there's over a certain financial threshold, then we've been getting a council resolution to execute that contract. So in a proposed bylaw, there would be certain contracts and agreements I would recommend that be signed by a member of council, in this case, the mayor. And that would include contracts such as like land exchange, land sale, or kind of big ticket items that require an extra level of oversight. But generally, it would be any two of the authorized signatories.
Thank you.
So,
Oh, sorry, Councilor Getty, followed by Councilor Morris.
So in other bylaws such as this, I believe it's one of the trusts, there's some method of either review or notice to the elected officials and some sort of an upper limit in terms of when it can be signed on a resolution. I would recommend those considerations be included.
Councilor Morris, followed by Councilor Fast.
I haven't read section 155 of the charter. But I'm looking at point 1 and it says, this bylaw, all the powers, duties and functions of council under section 154. to make agreements respecting municipalities' activities, works or services, but subject to the monetary limits set. So I'm guessing that what clause 1 already does provide for the employees or officers of the to sign the documents and agreements, but there's a monetary limit. So are you proposing to remove the monetary limits?
No, so that, the bylaw from 2005, I think it's 164 you're referring to.
Yeah,
My interpretation of that is that it's for procurement related agreements that have a financial dollar amount. So the idea is not to remove that and actually not to touch that bylaw yet. This bylaw would be to cover the types of documents that we're signing in the normal course of operations. So that would be like service agreements, leases, other legal instruments.
so are you proposing dollar limits for those?
Any contractor agreement that has a dollar amount would still be covered under the delegation of purchasing authority bylaw and the current purchasing policy. So in the section, there's a brief section of my report that outlines that review and update of the purchasing policy would include a review of that delegation of purchasing authority bylaw as well.
Okay, so it wasn't clear to me that whether you were trying to get rid of any of the dollar limits
Yeah.
or those kinds of things. So that was my major concern. So we'll get to see the bylaw approve it, so that's fine.
Council Fast.
Thank you. I'll be voting in favor of this motion. I like that it gives more transparency. I like that it updates a 20-year-old bylaw from early in the municipality's life, I guess, as a municipality. And I think it's fiscally responsible, the stewardship sort of side of it, to review policies and bylaws like this and update them. I think that's a good idea, and there'll be a couple more people who've signed things and seen things, and presumably more of us will know about it, so fewer things can go unnoticed. Thank you.
Council Fast. Not seeing any further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Moving on to 8.1, staff reports, municipal shuttle bus, municipal shuttle business case development. We have our intern strategic initiatives officer here with us today.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before we turn to report, I'd like to briefly summarize my recent discussions with TransLink regarding the community shuttle donation program to provide a little bit more context. So over the last several weeks, I've been speaking with Dave Lewin, who's TransLink's manager of community outreach and strategic partnerships, who oversees this program. While I haven't yet requested formal written confirmation, I have shared with him a high-level proposal, which is what I've outlined here in the report, which is a bookable cost recovery community bus model, which was very well received. Mr. Lewin confirmed that this approach does align well with TransLink's recommendations and requirements, particularly that it's a cost recovery but not-for-profit operating model that does include community partnerships. So he's also confirmed that Bowen Island has already been approved for the donation program, so no formal application is required on our end. TransLink has emphasized that donated shuttles should be operated in partnership with local community organizations. So for Bowen Island, this could include groups like Sky or COPD and likely other community groups as well. At this stage, though, the next step for us really is council direction. So with council's approval to develop the full business case, which would include any anticipated costs for the municipality, I'll then request written confirmation of TransLink's support. Once the business case is completed and approved by council, I can return to TransLink with confirmation that the municipality is prepared to proceed with accepting a donated vehicle. So in terms of timing, I would anticipate finalizing the business case by May. TransLink also expects to know in May which community shuttles will be retired from their fleet and would be available for donation either in June or July of this year. They're expecting 3 buses to be retired during that period. And we would be receiving the bus in the best condition because not all of them are continuing to be operational. Along with full inspection and mechanical reports, we would be privy to, so we could determine if we are wanting to proceed with a donated bus that's available in that time period. If none of those vehicles meet our needs, additional shuttles are retired every 3 to 6 months. So there will be ongoing opportunities to pursue the donation. And today's report outlines the steps required to deliver the business case, to develop the business case and return to council for approval, confirming our intent to accept a donated shuttle if an operationally viable vehicle is available. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. I'll look to council for questions or comments. Council Morse.
So I guess my other question is, is the business case to actually operate a service?
That's right.
So,
Well, it would be a bookable bus. So we aren't operating any regular service, but it would be kind of like through, this is the high level picture right now is it could be bookable through our booking coordinator. So it would be like a community group wants to rent a bus for the day to go into town to run errands or to do whatever they're wanting to do. There would be a minimum number of hours, say for instance, that you would rent the bus for. There'd be tiered cost model. So our nonprofit partners would receive, a baseline, cost recovery price. Whereas if it was a private group, such as, a business or even folks who might be having a wedding on the weekend, they could rent it as well, but there would be a higher cost.
so I guess my sort of question, and I'm not sure that this has been specifically addressed, but section 5 of the Public Transportation Act, whether this is an establishment or operation of quote independent transit services. So
No, we aren't providing transit services. It's just really a bookable shuttle. So that's what,
that's, I guess, what does transit services mean?
okay,
So we might just
want clarification on
want
that.
to make
Okay.
sure that, it sounds like they wouldn't, it's not going to be competing with the existing
No.
shuttle line, so it's probably not anything that would be a problem, but.
Right. No, I could see.
We had to do that for Peter's bus, as I recall, when you went downtown. But,
I could see that clarification.
Councilor Jurgensen, followed by Councilor Fast.
I'm concerned about how this might affect the operators. I'll fully disclose as a COBD employee. That's one thing, but COBD, IPS, and IDLC, as well as the West Vancouver School District, do offer shuttle for rent service. So I'm just wondering how you see that impacting current operators within the space.
we noticed. Can I ask a clarifying question? What
I'm
does
gonna hear from staff first.
I just
Councilor
wanted to know
Jurgensen.
what COPD.
You can come back to it, Councilor Morse. Thank you.
Thank you through the mayor. So I think COBD is the Canadian Organization of the Blind and Deafblind, if I understand correctly.
Correct.
Okay. Yes, so that would be part of the investigation for the business case. Is there a need for this type of shuttle service on island? I have spoken to one of those community groups who express that this would not be at all in conflict with what their pursuits are with their bus rental program. But that would be something to investigate as well. Is there still a need for this type of shuttle on island?
Thank you. And that's all I was wondering, if there was a step in there that was going to look at that and then provide that as part of the report.
Mhm. Sure, yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Jurgensen. Over to you, Councilor Fast.
Thank you. That clarifies things. It sounds to me like it's more like a room rental policy in terms of what kind of group are you and what are your needs and how many hours and that kind of thing. I'm wondering if will you be considering, I gather, because you mentioned it too at the beginning, but can you speak a little bit to the on-demand bus pilot? Would this also enable people to well, that would probably be the service side of it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so through the chair, my understanding of the TransLinks on-demand bus pilot program was that an individual could call up a bus and the bus would then come eventually in that route. So this isn't like that. You'd actually have to book the bus. There'd be a minimum number of hours that you're booking it for. So this would be a user group, ideally, community group. So there's no route planned for it. It's not like a service aspect of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Councillor
And
Preston.
thank you. And then just that I'm in favor of exploring this. I think we need more transportation options on Bowen. It's just doing the convening part of a municipality, which is talking to the different groups. I hope you'll talk to the Bowen Island Transportation Association.
They're no longer operating, but I would.
They're not operating, but I'm pretty sure they just redid their papers
Oh, great.
at Christmas. And and I think and I'm glad to hear you talking about that you'll get the maintenance records and things like that when taking a retired bus. But I like the idea of something that will help Bowen Islanders presumably be less dependent on individual cars necessarily on the ferry and on the roads. Might be more affordable for some of our community groups, and I like the alternative transportation kind of idea since we've had to pause this pathway project. Just exploring this and talking to the different groups on the island sounds like a good idea. Thank you.
Councillor Press, Councillor Morrison.
Are all the shuttle buses that they retire handicap accessible, so we get wheelchairs on them?
Yes, I'm sure that's my understanding.
Not seeing any further discussion, I will call the question. All in favor, or, sorry, do we have a motion on the floor? We do, right?
Yes. Aye.
Okay, Councillor Jurgensen, would you like to move the motion?
I'm sorry, not sure if that came through. I would like to move the motion.
Okay, moved by Councillor Jurgensen. As written, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Thank you, Liz. Thank you for the work that you've done on it, and thank you to council for your representation at UBCM, where we put this to TransLink. We know it's a need in the community, and I think a thoughtful approach to developing a business case to seeing what's out there and the needs assessment is a really strong move. Thank you for that. 9.1 correspondence. We have from our pharmacist on island, Kate's Pharmacy, regarding rural designation for Bowen Island Pharmacy to support recruitment for student APC dated February 1st, 2026. I'll look for council to put the motion on the floor and then we can have a discussion. Please. Councillor Best.
I move that council provide a letter of support to have Bowen Island formally recognized on ABC's rural designation list.
By Councillor Pass, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any questions, comments, or debate? Councillor Getty.
Had this discussion and made these efforts with respect to two previous applications that I know of with respect to the federal funding for transportation, and the other one in terms of a couple of times we've made an effort to try and get involved with iced tea, sorry. So there's some good work that's been done in terms of the descriptions of why we should be considered rural. And I think that if we can dig those up and refer to them, that's a good precedent.
Thank you. Not seeing any further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. That carries unanimously. Moving on to new business, 11.1, update to Council on Metro Vancouver business. 3 big meetings, 2 of which I was a part of. The governance committee met on January 22nd. Had the agenda of that meeting attached here. That there's discussion about advancing on looking at board composition, the size of the board, the composition of the board. So very interesting governance discussions happening at Metro Vancouver. Board of Directors meeting, the sort of flagship discussion that came out of that one in the open meeting was a rollback of DCCs. At all of the boards, because Metro Vancouver is 4 of them, it was a lively discussion as a result of developers coming as a result of cost pressures and affordability. And a motion was ultimately passed to roll back the growth pays for growth DCCs to 2025 rates. Bowen Island only pays into the Parks DCC, so we will see some relief on that, but very interesting and spirited discussion at the board for anyone that would like to take a look at that one. Regional Parks Committee meeting, big discussion on dog leashes in Pacific Spirit Park, which caused more email to my inbox than Cape Roger Curtis, surprisingly. Definitely a discussion there. They've done a lot of engagement in looking at how the park can serve a growing number of visitors, particularly with dog users on and off leash. There was a decision made there to do some further study on it and return it back. No TransLink, so that is it for Metro Vancouver, unless there's any questions there. Councillor Morse.
I've had a look at the governance committee discussion. What's the time frame? I mean, are they trying to get this done so they didn't apply for the 2026 election or the 2026 term?
Ultimately, any change to Metro Vancouver's governance is going to need legislative amendments from the province.
Yeah.
So I haven't heard any appetite from the province to do that. The province is looking at regional districts more broadly as well. There is a provincial liaison on that committee as well, who's staying informed. And there's a host of pieces that the governance committee is looking at. They've been looking at remuneration, they've been looking at committee structure, they've been looking at the board structure as well. So some of those recommendations have actually gone through to be implemented, but this one in terms of board composition is going to require
Yeah, no, I know.
an assist from the province.
But I was just wondering if there is.
That's up to the legislature, but I haven't heard any indication that there's legislation coming. The governance committee doesn't have a recommendation yet as to what that ultimate composition structure should look like. And frankly, the board is very divided. So any decision at that level right now is difficult to come to. Not seeing any further questions. Over to 11.2, update council on Islands Trust business. Over to our municipal trustees.
Okay, thank you. I prepared a little more than I did last time, although last time I had prepared quite a bit. It was just hard to communicate. This time I just wanted to say I think reviews are good. And last term, there was a very detailed review done at the Islands Trust by the Director of Finance, Julia Mobbs, who's currently the director. And every step, all through, everything was checked, all correct. So the correctness is there. That doesn't mean we couldn't change some of the terms or update things. I'm hoping that when this review is conducted and that there's some things that Bowen Island receives that are not included in the calculation, as far as I can tell. So that includes GIS mapping licenses, for which I think there's more BIM staff have licenses than the Islands Trust does, but the Islands Trust pays it, and it's something like $12,000, and that was a few years ago. So I don't know whether that, that and the groundwater mapping that we're now using for the Grafton Lake watershed study, and then some of the development proposals like Lot 7. So these, I just want to also look at the things that we don't pay for. And if we're doing a comprehensive kind of review, you're asking the comprehensive questions, if you can ask those. Lots of direct benefits. I've got a long list. I won't bore everybody with them now, but another thing that is not in the calculation is the permissive tax exemptions that Bowen Island Municipality provides for conservation lands. For example, for Cape Roger Curtis land or other lands that are set aside for ecological purposes that we don't collect the full taxes on. Perhaps that can be worked into the calculation. Anyway, and then the big questions for me is, how do you value the benefits of like years ago, a few years ago, 2017, when the municipality asked the Islands Trust to help stop the industrial logging that would come. And they did. Other reasons probably too, but they were in there and they only slowed down when we said, thank you. Please, it looks like it's over. And also the upholding the decisions that council was in the process of making in our conditions about the Cape Roger Curtis campground and our official community plan. So those kinds of things happen once every number of years, but what value to the community? It's difficult to put a dollar value on. So I just hope that these things will be considered when you and staff have those discussions. Thank you. And then the update side, we've got Trust Council coming up in March. So we will be meeting in Duncan at the new community center of Cowichan. So it's a big new facility and hosted by the Cowichan Nation, and it'll be interesting to see that. Thank you. That's an open meeting. Everybody can attend by Zoom or attend in person. March, first week of March, second week of March.
So the, on the 5th of February, there was a full day reconciliation training program that was put on by the trust using, and they'd hired some consultants to help with the workshop. And this one was on Indigenous specific racism and how to recognize it and how to respond to it, and different scenarios, lots of role playing for the full day. So I ended up being in the same small group as the CAO and the regional district manager for one of the events. And that was a very interesting day. I've also been involved with the working group that the CAO has organized with respect to trying to figure out a better system of onboarding. So once the trustees are elected, in October, there's a meeting in November, and at that meeting, we have to, one of the main things is to vote in members of the executive committee and try to figure out ways of helping the new trustees to understand and what the positions are about, the amount of time that's involved, the amount of knowledge that you have to have for different islands, and to make sure that there's people that are finding ways of making sure that people understand better who it is that they're voting for and what they stand for, so that we get representatives that reflect the priorities of the trustees instead of some things. What's happened is that people are surprising us. They partway through the term, and we didn't realize what some of their motivations were. So that's an interesting process too. There's the chairs of the various committees that are working together on that. So, coming up to the first meeting in March, where there's going to be the ongoing and difficult discussions about the budget, and it would have been helpful in terms of figuring out, and I suppose they're still possible before the March meeting, to figure out some strategies that we could use as 2 votes out of 26 to try and get some of our points across, but we'll see how that goes.
Councilor Fast.
One more is February the 18th, and that's a committee of the whole of Trust Council held online to discuss the budget, because the operational review, there's this changes coming in later. Trust Council only meets formally 4 times a year. So that December 18th, we have a financial planning committee meeting in the morning, and then that moves right into the committee of the whole about the budget, so that everybody understands. February 18th.
What time is the financial planning meeting?
Financial planning meeting starts at 10:30 after the audit committee, which is not open. And then the committee of the whole begins at 1.
The earliest part, there's 3 meetings, so the earliest one is the audit.
Yeah, I know,
And then
I've been on the audit committee.
Thank you for the update. So, yeah, I've also had the opportunity to dig in a bit more to the financials, which is partly what prompted the letter. The missing component, I think, in the documents that we have, the documents that have been shared to the financial planning committee are the allocations to local planning services. So we've seen the allocations to Trust Council, we've seen the allocations to the Islands Trust Conservancy, we've seen the administrative lines broken down in some detail, but we haven't seen the formula in review to how some of these pieces are being pushed out to LPS and LTC, and what the calculation of that is. And so what I'm curious about, and these will be some of the questions that I have for Islands Trust staff when they come forward, and certainly questions that you may be able to bring to the Financial Planning Committee, is what is the systematic logic to that? So when we see things like $240,000 for software expenses, you know, we really shouldn't be paying for office furniture, Windows licenses, basic infrastructure for planning staff. So does that include all of those expenses? The other piece that concerns me from a historical trend perspective, we've talked about the 88% cumulative increase, but when you break out those individual buckets of Trust Council, Islands Trust Conservancy, and administration, in this term, those buckets have increased by about 50% expenses. And when you look at the local planning service, which we just have sort of a summary for, it's only increased 5%. So where that becomes, I think, a question that I would like to dig in with the trust a little bit is, if the core function of the trust is as a planning organization, and given that half of staff in the trust are planning, how is it that that planning function has only seen a 5% increase in budget uplift, whereas the rest of the organization has seen 50? So that's a big question there. And part of what informs that, is I just lost my train of thought. Maybe I'll come back to it. But is in the financial planning documents, when we see things like the business cases, right, for the new manager of Indigenous Affairs or the senior policy advisor, or new projects that are coming up. What's interesting to me is that a number of those positions and projects will mention an LTC or LPS specific component of that job. And I'm curious as to whether that component of the job has been allocated out. So if a core function of the job is going to be working with local trust areas for bylaw development, that isn't a share that Bowen Island should be paying into as part of the municipal pool. It should be credited out before the administrative allocation rate gets applied and before that municipal pool is calculated. So I'm looking forward to the response that we get from the trust. I really want to see that line by line accounting of what's been backed out and what's been left in. And then even with those new business cases and even previous business cases, okay, if we're bringing new positions and new resources into the Trust Council lines and the administrative lines, are they being appropriately accounted for to move out whatever portion of their expenses would be local planning related? And what is the basis for that calculation and rationale? So that's really what I'm looking for when the trust comes to speak to us. That's really the intent of the letter. So when you read the letter that I wrote, those 4 points are getting at that. And, you know, per trust policy 7.2.6, we're supposed to have all of that by December 31st. And some of our requests feel like they've gone a bit unheeded. So we're going to get that, because the other flip side of that in that policy and the protocol agreement is we only have until February 28th to submit our feedback, whether it's going to make changes or not. So curious to the answers of those questions. Those are some of the high level pieces that I have. I'll probably circulate a document to council. I'm not sure if the CFO is going to provide anything as well, but there's certainly some analysis that I think is going to come once we get that LPS, LTC bucket and how that's been allocated.
LPS,
Local planning services and LTC, the local trust committee.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how my understanding is that's how it's broken up in the budget lines. Councilor Getty.
So my question to the financial officer would be that if the trust, if the director of finance of the trust hasn't been breaking down all of the items that go to trust council admin or whatever the other one was, conservancy, in terms of you know, we've been focusing on individual line items, and if there's within the line items that there's greater calculation, how much just in terms of workload, and whether or not that's going to be realistic to expect that, if that's a new request from us. So if we're figuring out square footage of the head office and how much of that is used by planning and what's the percentage in that, how does that break down, and you know, breaking down each of the line items that we've been looking at macro in terms of this has nothing to do with planning, it has everything to do with admin. But now we're asked to break down the lines that have to do with admin, getting into micro detail.
To the rest of council, through the mayor, or sorry, to Councilor Getty, through the mayor. That piece is the last piece of information that would fulfill the request of information. I'll follow up again with the CFO for the Islands Trust. It's my assumption that they have some kind of pre-calculated formula that they use to create that information, and certainly if I don't know that I could answer how much additional work it would be. I'm coming from the assumption that the work has already been done. So I'll follow up with that information request one more time and be able to include that in the bucket of information that I get from them. Again, you know, my role is simply to take that requisition from the trust and apply it to the properties. They are a legitimate other taxing authority. So just the same as I get a requisition from Metro Vancouver, or I get a requisition from TransLink, I apply the rates that I've been instructed to apply. So I will provide additional information to any councillor who asks me for it. That's not something that is that I would keep hidden or anything. So, and any councillor that is going to ask for additional information regarding that Islands Trust calculation, I'm certainly happy to provide anything that I've been given.
Council Morris.
I just sort of wanted to add from history. There is a spreadsheet prepared that allocates the costs to Trust Council, to Trust Area Services, to Islands Trust Operations, to general admin services, and then there's a calculation that's done that's set out in the policy. So Julia doesn't share the calculation of the requisition with you two. So you've got the spreadsheet that shows how she presented the percentage of admin services that are allocated. So that picks up a lot of it, but before that, she's done a spreadsheet. And I remembered that from several years back, and found an old one, so I went master for them.
So, through the chair, what happens with the budget now is that there's all the different line items, and it's been a little bit more accessible in terms of the check marks that are on the far left side, an additional column in terms of which ones are allocated to, but which ones we share and which ones we don't. So my understanding is that the latest request is to dig in deeper on some of those items that we've got a share of, that is looking at it more in more detail in terms of what percentage of that should be shared. So it's more of a breakdown than the original.
Yeah, but I guess it's a matter of looking at what's in that pot and then what.
Right, but it's deeper than the spreadsheet.
Well, you've got to, the spreadsheet has to have background done in order to figure out which number goes in which column.
Yeah. Over to Councilor Fast, and then I'll get some clarification on the policy as I've read it. Councilor Fast.
We have received some updated speaker notes, and I went through them carefully. It looks like the Bowen Island requisition has come down a couple of percentage points. So down to 31.1 plus 1.4 from new property. So just down a little bit. All the time, they're adjusting and finding as new information comes in or as the fine tuning is happening. And we have received, I do see all kinds of calculations, but which exactly ones are what you want, I don't know. And I think it would be better if I just let staff to staff kind of handle this and handle your questions. So,
Yeah.
but if you're looking for something specific you think might be in our email somewhere or something, let us know. Let me know.
Yeah, so there was the email sent on February
Yeah.
3rd, but I would also draw the attention to trust policy 7.2.6, section C 2.4, which says, as some budget items in location codes, the location codes may serve only parts of the organization instead of the whole organization. These budget items will be examined annually to determine the percentage to be allocated to the municipal pool. So each of the budget lines needs to be examined to determine the percentage to be allocated to the municipal pool. And that's the work that we're asking for. We're just asking for the work that is already in the policy that I haven't seen the detail on, and I don't believe has been communicated. And is supposed to be communicated to us by December 31st. So there's just a policy piece and timeline piece as it pertains to the intergovernmental process, particularly because of the questions that we're going to get with the increases to the trust. And it certainly, I think, informed the community opinion poll that we had at the last election. And it's just, in my mind, at least a matter of good governance. Councilor Giddey.
I think that those calculations, and they may not have been sent to us by December the 31st, and then I can't answer to that. I'm not sure why, and that would be a question. I'm sure that there's going to be some sort of reasonable answer. But the bigger question is, how do we feel about this? When we worked on the previous budget before the December meeting, we cut back, the position of the biologist, for instance. Yes, it's an environmental. That position was a full-time position that was funded by a grant. The grant's no longer available, so we have recommended to council that it not be funded in the budget unless there was grant funding for it. So that was one of the things that got cut. And we worked the budget back so that it was less onerous. So then we get to the December meeting and there's this operational review and a recommendation and a budget that followed closely after that, recommending sizable amounts in terms of both the reconciliation work and the communications. And it seems to me that that spiked the budget back up. And we need to have some sort of a discussion in terms of not necessarily value for money, but is that something that in fact we can support? The trust is taking a leadership role. It's actually providing precedents that are useful to many other regions and the provincial government, and we're encouraged to continue with that work. There's no additional funding coming from the province. The only source of revenue is property taxes. So, here we are in this position where there's these really, really good recommendations. Can we fully support that? And if not, what are our alternatives, and what are we trying to negotiate as this municipality to the whole of the trust council? It's like going to Metro and having Bowen has one vote as opposed to all the other weighted votes. We've got 2 votes out of 26. So we need some arguments and some strategies and some ways of talking to the trust council and staff about what the priorities are and how we can make this fit. If we go line by line and get the micro and figure it out, I don't know if the percentage that is going to be saved is sizable enough to make a difference. I think the big ticket items are the ones that have come in most recently, and that's it'd be most helpful in terms of having some feedback and ideas. It came up at the open house this past weekend, and it was, 2 people reacted in terms of, oh, wow, if if that's what they want to spend the money on, then I can support that, and that's not an atypical kind of conversation in terms of people not. I mean, it sometimes gets said around council table in terms of, I wasn't as aware, and every time I hear, I get, more interested in it, or the reaction is positive, so. It's a matter of, do we support the broader issues, the bigger issues, and if not, then what what arguments can we raise that would be alternatives? We've got to go into that council meeting and just, say that there's 12 cents here and there's $1,000 there and there's whatever. We can probably win those arguments, but I don't know that it's gonna necessarily make a difference.
And I would offer, I think it might. So the way that the municipal pool calculation works and the administrative allocation works, based on my understanding and the research that I've done, again, is driven by growth in the trust council lines, the trust conservancy lines, and the administration lines. So using the example of the communications liaison, for example, what's interesting in that business case is that in the business case for the communications position, it speaks to that person being responsible for liaising with local trust unions, right? Which is going to be a big part of that job. And as a result, because that's a planning function, it's a planning supporting function, it needs a percentage applied to it to back out that portion of the job. And that exists across a number of the positions, because that's what's growing the administration line or the trust council line or the conservancy line, wherever that staff expense shows up. So the challenge is that I think there's been a number of these planning supporting functions and initiatives that are finding their way into either the trust council, the conservancy, or the administration budget that are being 100% allocated to the municipal pool, that are leading to that 50% increase of trust council, admin, and conservancy budgets versus only the 5% increase in planning functions. So the reason why I'm asking for the line by line analysis is that needs to be systematic in there so that those costs can be backed out. Because those costs, when they're included, they affect the size of that allocation rate, so that 34.8% or whatever it is. The more stuff that finds their way into our buckets, that administration rate grows, and then we pay for a greater share. So you sort of get tagged for it twice. And I agree. I don't think there's any cheese down the hole of the conversation of what is the benefit of the trust. And that's not kind of the argument that I'm in. It's just like, is the trust allocating the right amount to the right buckets? Because my intuition is that planning supporting functions are driving that 50% increase in the expense areas that we get tagged with. And they should more appropriately be put in that planning line because the planning functions of the trust are growing. The reality is that the trust is an organization that manages 18 OCPs, 22 land use bylaws with 35 planning staff. And to say that all those trust area services, the payroll people that support the trust, that support the planning functions, all of that stuff needs to be looked at and have a planning supporting function backed out of it. Because there is, just in sort of my preliminary calculations, I'll be interested to see how my assumptions get updated when we get that information. There's a very significant savings across all of those lines, across the other 50% of the organization that are supporting those 4 local trust committee planning functions. And, again, those are some of the questions that, I would have for the financial planning committee, that I would have for staff, that I look forward to having answered by staff, because it affects the economic equity of the island, of what a household is being charged with. And it's not a benefits, it's not a relative benefits conversation. It's are the spreadsheets lining up in a way that Bowen Island is truly paying its fair share?
Well, then I guess, all of that is important. I think it's equally important to have the conversation in terms of this fairly large increase with respect to these interest areas or these admin areas. And, you know, just how realistic it is to put, I mean, it was an extra roughly $300,000 in the budget just on reconciliation. And, you know, there wasn't any discussion in terms of whether or not it could be brought in piecemeal, whether or not it could be staged, whether or not it could be, you know, just, I mean, there is a business case and there's a job description, but it's pretty high level and pretty broad. And I'm not sure that, you know, in this coming year's budget, when on the one hand, they say that it's an election year and all the staff are going to be half the time, they're not going to have trustees and planning commissions that are up to speed. And it's like, you know, just how much of this needs to be brought in with this year's budget and whether or not it's realistic. I mean, every other year, there were surpluses that came probably from extra planning that got, you know, attached. And that's the argument I've heard in terms of we had the benefit of those surpluses that came from planning functions that went back into general. You know, if they're over budgeting for something that is not realistic, then it will end up as a surplus and will that go back into general? And it's, you know, we tried to work away from ending up with surpluses that could act as some sort of an income source. So, I mean, that's one of the things that is not plagued, but been part of this calculation in terms of there's no surpluses that are part of the income. And, you know, we've handled the budget well, so that's dried up and, you know, that's one of their arguments, but I think it's a two-pronged thing. If you think that there's significant savings that can be, you know, allocated to and analyzed in terms of being part of planning, that's definitely something that needs to be clarified. And, you know, if it's part of the spreadsheet and it can be pulled easily, then, you know, we've been asking those questions. And if it's not something that comes up in terms of answers that we're getting, then we can push it. But it seems to me that it's more complicated than just that. That there's maybe 2 or 3 prongs in terms of the arguments that we raised. I mean, we're having this discussion in an open meeting and they're probably watching it, so they're aware of what our concerns are. And I think it's more than just figuring out the percentages of line on this.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think we should be having this conversation in open meeting. You know,
Yeah.
you don't want to go
No.
to a legal battle with the trust or ask for judicial review or ask for
No.
you know, an inspection under
I'm not
C-51 of the Trust Act. So, you know, let's have that conversation in good faith out in the open so that you know, the tough questions can get answered. There's good places to be found on the other side of conflict. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions or comments. Move on to question period. Are there any folks online or in the gallery that would like to ask questions of the council today? Not seeing, oh, you have a question, Mr. King?
Pertaining to the dangerous cargo sale. You and I have had discussions on it. I think we should bring it to the council's attention that right now in the afternoon, when the dangerous cargo time is at 4:35 ferry, the only vehicle going back on it is the tanker truck for the propane, which has changed from smaller tankers that feed houses to a larger tanker that feeds the tank at the pit, where they top up the tank all the time. Fellow empties it, sits for 5 hours, and then comes down at 4:35 right at the beginning of rush hour. And it's a bit of a show down there where it's a mess. If we could move it back to the 12:35 sailing, the problem disappears. Tanker leaves the island. They could probably save us some money because that cost of having that truck and that operator sit here for 5 hours is put into our fuel costs that we pay. The truck leaves the island, middle of the day, it's middle of the week. It's about 2/3 full on that sailing on an ongoing basis. 2/3 on either side. 4 o'clock, all the contractors are leaving and it's a bit of a mess. You can solve the problem right there. We spoke with somebody at BC Ferries, they thought it was a good idea. And I think we should move on it as being something that would be beneficial to the island. I looked for something that is a problem and I couldn't find it. If you bring dynamite over, the truck goes back empty. You bring a gasoline truck over, they wash the tank with diesel. They go back anytime they want because they're not dangerous cargo. So at that point, the only thing we deal with is a propane truck, which always has a residual propane in it, so it's got to go back on a dangerous cargo sailing. So, you know, I talked to Superior, they save money. They get their truck back out of rush hour, they pay the guy overtime to sit here. It's something we should look at. Now,
So I'm gonna pause you there just to let you know that I have had some back and forth with BC Ferries on this and
Good.
the last, and just last week, they let me know that they do have a list of commercial operators who end up on that ferry. So my understanding is that they'll be doing some engagement with the providers and companies and commercial operators that use that dangerous cargo sailing and we can hear from there. So in terms of what council can do, it's we have long wished we have control over the operational aspects of BC Ferries, but it's ultimately with them and we can certainly inform the community when we hear back from them.
okay,
So thank you for your question.
the question also with the gas station. We have an old station. I worked there for a year. Everything is old. Al bought all the pumps to old. He bought them used. They've been around forever. People who service them are retired, they're long gone. And they're held together with baling wire and duct tape. When a pump goes down like recently with diesel, it was out for almost a month. And I'm sitting at home and I go chatting with my wife about it and I said, well, I got a solution. They've got a marked diesel tank as well as clear diesel for cars and trucks. If they have a problem with a pump, you immediately bring over a truck.
Mr. King, I'm gonna let you know that you got 3 minutes for your question, so I'll ask you to arrive at your question, please.
Yeah, you pump out the marked diesel into the truck, you put clean diesel in the marked tank. Now you've got diesel fuel for cars. You don't really need to sell marked diesel, you can get away with it. But diesel, a lot of people over here count on it, and they don't leave it out.
Mr. King, I'm gonna ask you again, can you arrive at your question?
Can we put a letter to FuelX to say, can you look at your procedures? You're the only one on the island. It's not like you're 13th and Marine and everybody's got options. You're the sole provider of fuel on this island. I think you have to sharpen up the way you do business. Look at options, look at solutions that work. And that's a no-brainer. You got 2 tanks. You change one over, now you got a diesel tank for trucks.
So maybe I'll pause there and I'll look to staff. I know that we have had some conversations with FuelX. I don't know if we're prepared to speak at it at this moment, but it's certainly something we can report back to.
Yeah, thanks.
I know it's a private business and it's different, you know, it's difficult dealing with a private business sometimes because it's kind of out of your control. It really isn't.
Yeah, so I'm gonna let the CAO answer the question and then we'll move on.
Yeah, through the mayor, all I can say is last time we did FuelX is when they had a proposal to go with fully automated pumps on the island, which would see no attendance. And we pointed out how that didn't conform with the fire codes. They need a attending on site. So since then, there's been no movement in that direction. So I'm assuming that what they determined after their own reviews that we were correct in our assertion that they need attendance at site. So I haven't heard anything back on they have renewed a push to go to fully automated fuel systems. Yeah, that's the last thing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. King. Thank you to staff. And with that, we'll move on to adjournment. Move to adjourn by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Fast. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we are, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Peter.